彼女ここで春秋の話に変えてきたんですね。ですからそうは言ってもというところですね、ここ
は。Found this a rather optimistic view. At the time that Mencius was teaching, a lot of people were desensitized by the sorts of things that.
ここで論調を変えようとしてディセンティサイズという言葉を使ってですね、感覚を鈍らせる。by sort of things.
That had been happening just in terms of general unrest.
Unrest と不安定ですね。instability 安定しない。
Instability.
だからメンシャスが
These
出て
things
きた。
continued actually beyond Mencius' time. It
Beyond Mencius' time の後です
was
ね。
a rather long period of confusion and turbulence in China.
Confusion 混乱と変動ですね。
And the thinker who represents what's often viewed as a kind of opposing school,
反対学派。
Chunzi, who lived a few generations later, was even more in a troubled period. And in fact,
even more in trouble period ですね。
he had a real political life himself. He did have a
まあだからモーシーの頃よりもっと戦国時代の後期になってね、世の中乱れてきたんで、まあ荀子みたいな人が出てきた。
high position in a particular court, but the ruler that he was working for got assassinated, and that ended his political career there. So he had some real hands-on experience, you might say, with some of the uglier sides of power conflicts. He didn't worry so much as Confucius did about proper succession. In effect, he just takes dictators to be part of the picture. But nevertheless, he's concerned about good ways to rule and bad ways to rule. So he too views himself as someone who is continuing the Confucian tradition. His focus tends to be rather pragmatic. And
まあ彼の方がもっと実務的だっていうんですよね。
this is one of the reasons that he is viewed as realistic.
現実的だって。
Pragmatic in the sense that he saw a lot of the things that societies had to do to be aimed at really basically fulfilling fundamental needs. He thought,
だから春樹が言ったのはもっとね、really 狙って aimed at really basically fulfilling fundamental needs 人間の基本的なね、need 求めるものをfulfill 実行する、まあ、求める。
thought societies had to be quite organized if people were even to have enough to eat.
Quite organized if people were even to have enough to eat.
It isn't obvious in an agrarian society
農耕社会ですね。
like China that people are going to have enough to eat. So there has to be some real concentrated effort to make sure that food gets dispersed. He's pragmatic too in defending ritual.
Defending ritual 礼を守る、擁護する。
Which might seem a little bit surprising, but he thinks that it's important that ritual play the role that it does in our society. One of the reasons I think it might seem society
だからやっぱり荀子が礼、まあ孟子よりも礼を重んじるって具体的に外に出てくるものをその礼と言うんですね。人が表に出てくるものを礼と言うんですけど、荀子の場合は礼を重んじた。孟子の場合は人を重んじた。人って内なるもんだけど、その外に出てくるアクションを求めたってことを彼女は言ってるんですね。
Slightly surprising on the surface is that in general, ritual would often have to do with things like funerals and so on.
まあ、もうさっきのビデオと同じで、with things like funeral ですね。葬儀などです。
And the idea of ancestors and
外に出てきたものを重んじる。
The ancestors' spirits sometimes were a focus of these rituals. It's certainly not that Shunzi was encouraging superstition.
It's certainly not that Shunzi was encouraging superstition. Superstition というのは迷信ですね。
He, in fact, was very anti-superstitious.
だから迷信は反対、荀子はね。
So whenever he was defending ritual, it would be very much in pragmatic terms, what it does for us. And his point was, it's not really that in having a funeral ritual or
だから his point was it's not really that in having funeral ritual,
having an offering to the ancestors that one is talking to another world. But this helps us
but
to channel our emotions. As human beings, we have natural emotions in response.
だからこれは前と同じですよね。ナチュラルエモーションって、ナチュラルエモーション、ナチュラルエモーション、そう、もともと、we have natural emotion ですね。もともと心の中にそういうふうな、葬式とか、さっき言った七面鳥が焼かれたら、その悲しいとか、そういうふうなエモーションですね。
To certain upsetting events. And if
さて、アップセッティングイベントですね。さっき七面鳥が焼かれるようなこと。象が死ぬっていうこと。
we have a ritual, this enables us to
The ritual, this enable us to その例がもっとそれをね、深掘りする。
respond in a way that is controlled and actually made beautiful.
ね、made beautiful controls.
He points to tradition, as is typical in Chinese thought, and points out that the rituals were invented by human beings.
Ritual was invented by human beings.
The sage kings,
Sage king, 聖人ですね。
again, the wisest human beings of the tradition, and they were invented precisely for this reason, to deal with our real situation here and now. Interestingly, he finds music to be
これさっきのビデオなかったですけど、彼女はミュージックを言ってるんですね。
one of the kinds of means that is particularly pragmatic in this regard. And he
例と一緒で、ミュージックも楽ですね。楽もやっぱり物理的にね、人を
here
刺激す
again,
る。
he's arguing against the Moists. The Moists, because they are concerned with bringing about a certain kind of social order and also with concrete results, tended to downplay the
控えめ言う、ダウンプレイ。
advantages of ritual and music. In fact, they tended to think that far too much was spent on these things. That if rulers wanted to concern themselves with their
密接な、ワイヤーというコンサーンと密接なつながり関係がある、ワイヤー。
society, they should be a lot more concerned about everybody getting enough to eat than with having rituals that bring the community together. But Shunzi claims that bringing the community
Bring the community together ですね。
together by means of rituals
リチュア
and
ル
music
とミュージックで
is
すね。
actually a very fundamental need as well. He comments, when music is performed in the ancestral temple of the ruler,
Ancestral temple of rulers. In the ancestral temple of rulers. 店舗、お寺ですね。
and the ruler and his ministers, superiors and inferiors, listen to it together, there are none who are not filled with a spirit of harmonious reverence.
このレバレンスっていうのはですね、あれですね、レバレンス、ちょっと待ってください。敬意ですね、尊敬。敬意、尊敬。レベレンスですね。
When it is performed within the household, and father and sons, elder and younger brothers listen to it together,
だから彼はだから、霊と音楽も家族をこうまとめる。さっきもちょっと説明しましたけどね。
there are none who are not filled with a spirit of harmonious kinship. And when it is performed in the community, and old people and young together listen to it, there are none who are not filled with a spirit of harmonious obedience. What Shunza is suggesting here is that the harmony of music actually serves to harmonize the community. By listening to music with other people in other positions within society,
これ見て僕思ったんですけど、やっぱ中国なんかもエコノミストなんか読んで書いてありましたけど、Facebook 利用したり、人民を操作する。どっちかっていうと、ロシアは RT っていうテレビやってます。中国はチャイナデイリーとか、CNTV やって、いろいろ宣伝してますけど、音楽なんかもやっぱりそういう情報操作に使うんでしょうね、きっとね。気がつきませんでしたけど。だから、民主主義国家でそういうふうなことをやってるとこは多分ないと思うんですけど、でもそういうふうな情報操作のために昔の人は霊とリチュアルとミュージックって言ったんで、やっぱ今もその音楽っていうのはそういう意味では、情操教育ってよく言いますけど、大事なんでしょうね。日本の国家もそういうふうなことやってるんですかね。やってないような気がするんですけどね。
We're brought to the thought of harmony. You might consider the way different instruments harmonize together, or certainly sometimes a voice and instruments. There's a kind of way that coordination, often of many people, is brought about and turned into something beautiful. Music is a kind of image for this cooperation, where people are freely moving. I mean, you might consider too that dance would often go along with music. People freely move, but nevertheless it's coordinated. And this is a kind of vision of social interaction, of a harmonious kind of relationship. Music also tends to sharpen the senses. It draws attention to itself. We tend to focus on music when we're seriously listening to it in these kind of formal settings. And this, according to Shunza, served a very, very vital purpose in society. It allowed people commonly to think about elements of different sorts, whether you're thinking about human beings in different roles in the community, or thinking about the elements of nature, all of these things working together in a kind of harmony. Even our bodily forces are harmonized. The fact that we feel like moving along with music at times would suggest that music is not only reminding us of what it's like to harmonize, to conjoin ourselves cooperatively into some larger kind of event, but also it draws us in. We're aware of our belonging to the larger audience of our community.
だからこの belonging to the larger audience of our community。国のなんていうかな、結束を強めるためにその音楽っていうのを利用したんですね、昔の人は。
So Shunza thinks that it's important to keep in mind that human beings have other needs besides having enough to eat, important as that was, and that it's vital to satisfy emotional,
食べ物だけでなくてね、
spiritual needs, and to give people
spiritual needs
a real sense that it's possible to have harmony and really be satisfied at the same time. Of course, Shunza was well aware that a lot did need to be done socially in order to ensure that people did get enough to eat. His policies in general are not entirely opposed to the Moist policy in that he thinks coercion is necessary too.
Coercion, 強制。
He thinks both hierarchy and coercion are necessary.
だから春秋はね、階層構造と強制ですね。
The reason he thinks this is he doesn't think that we're going to automatically end up agreeing how to work together unless there's some kind of plan.
だからさっきのビデオ見てるから、これのところよく
So
わか
he
ると
thinks
思うん
it's
ですけど
important
ね。
to have a hierarchy. You need some kind of organization so that you can make a plan. Of course, you could have a situation where everybody gets together, agrees something needs to be done, and make a plan collectively. So it's
プラン、コレクティブで集合的にですね。
seen. But Shunza doesn't think that usually works. People start to quarrel. One person has one
ほっとくと人々はね、喧嘩したりなんかやりだすんで、
idea, another person has another idea. This doesn't get
ま
anything
ともに
going.
聞かないから。
So it's really important to have people who are actually supervising.
これは中国人特有ですね。日本人はこういうことないよね。
And inevitably, he thinks in order to avoid quarreling and actually get some work done, it's going to be necessary to have some people directing other people. Like Confucius, he doesn't see anything inherently wrong with that. But he does think that hierarchy should be based on merit. I'll say more about that in a minute. As far
On merit, 実力によって。
as coercion is concerned, he also thinks there are a lot of situations where people aren't just going to naturally end up doing some of the work that needs to be done. Some work having to do with flooding, for example, really requires getting the whole community out. And people might not automatically end up joining in the effort, or they might have pressing reasons
ほっといたらね、
that lead them to
ま
other
とまらない。
things. So in fact, he thinks there are times when conscription is appropriate.
コンスクリビッションっていうのは
What's important
徴兵制度。
is if you're going to conscript people to, for example, build dikes, do certain things.
大工ってこれなんかなんだっけ、堤防だよね。ビルド大工、堤防作る。